live, are we?
We are. We just
Oh.
went live with that news. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. Right. Another Johnny, future Johnny. We're
Another
adding to
future
the
Johnny.
rolls.
All right.
Right.
Congratulations.
So a little boy. Right.
Excellent.
Hopefully the school system can handle another Johnny.
That's right. Well, you gave enough of a break that they're ready again.
Sorry.
All right. If we could start with a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. Stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Swager?
Here.
Mrs. Davis? Here. Mr. Benton?
Here.
Mrs. Boer?
Here.
Mrs. Thomas? Here.
Reading of the notice.
The Johnstown-Monroe Board of Education will hold a special board meeting at 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, July 10th, 2024, which replaces the regular meeting scheduled for 5 p.m. on Monday, July 8th. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the meeting as indicated in the agenda. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 3 minutes. Upon request of the superintendent, the district shall make reasonable accommodation for a person with a disability to be able to participate in this activity. Recording shall be made of each meeting of the board as an administrative aid and shall be used to preserve public documents of the board.
Thank you. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I have 3 changes to the agenda. If you look under consent agenda, and it'll be items D and E. So it says administrative employment. Yes.
Page 5 for
Should
us.
be page 5 on your paper. Administrative employment. We had TBD in there, and now I can publish it as Mr. Michael Shipton as the new high school principal. And then the following item E, continuing in consent, would also be Mr. Michael Shipton, and that would be for up to 10 additional days so that he'll have time to transition, and Mrs. King offered to help with that. And then the other change I have is going to be toward the back of your agenda. So if you're on pages, sorry, it'll be on page 14. And what we did is we added a resolution. So it's resolution 24-7-161A. And that will be an amendment to the interim treasurer's contract. What we discovered is that we know Felicia's contract is coming to an end, and we wanted to make sure that she has her bond in place and that she is properly employed by the board. So good news is we're talking about long-term relationship here, professional relationship, so that part is exciting. But this will carry us now through next month. So we added that resolution again. I called it A because we had already published the resolution numbers. And that's all I have unless there's questions.
All right. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Any questions on the agenda?
On page 12, wait a minute. One of the volunteers we're approving is related to me. I think it has to be taken separate. I just lost it.
It's not 12.
Now it's
13 maybe? Nope.
It'd probably be
Alan Thomas.
yes. Did you find it?
13. top
He's related to you?
He
Oh,
is
You sure?
related.
You sure?
Gonna have to fight you today.
I'm glad
So
you're
we'll have to-
abstaining.
oh yeah, he's
So
top
it's
page
F.
13
Yeah, there it is.
on F.
On F.
So if when we get to that, if we pull F out for a separate vote.
Please.
I already pulled it out. That's why it's not in.
Oh, it's a separate as
Oh,
F,
it is
not in
separate?
Yeah,
consent.
that's why
You put it
I
in
pulled
now.
it out of consent where we
Oh.
normally have it, and it's its own resolution
Okay.
that allows
I
Mrs.
get
Thomas to
confused.
abstain. No, that's fine. Typically, those would be consent agenda items, but I pulled it already
Okay.
off
Sounds
to the
good.
side like that, so then the board members can vote individually and in mass for those items.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments on the agenda? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Any public remarks?
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Hill? Please, yeah,
go.
they can't hear you on the online if you're not up there.
It's good seeing everybody. Just a couple real quick things. One is I want to comment on the treasurer's report. The information is clear, it's concise, it's easy to read, and really, it's very, very good. I'm glad it's included in the agenda. A couple other things. One is dealing with the construction. New construction that's going to go on. I think it's wonderful. I hope a lot we're going to be doing this like we did the old Searfoss without coming through the air. I think that's wonderful. I was wondering about the multi-purpose building. It says it's going to be for athletics. I don't know whether it's a field house type setting or whether it's a building part gymnasium or what. I don't know whether private money was solicited or included in this, and I was just curious. I don't need an answer right now, but if somebody could provide me with some information.
Yeah,
on it.
I'm happy. If the board's okay.
Yeah,
I know we
go
don't
ahead.
always respond, but I have enough information. So it's a multi-phase project, and the first aspect of what you mentioned is the 6th classroom addition that's going on to the high school. We're all using public money for all facets of the projects that we have outlined. On the multi-purpose, it'll be available to the community as well as to the school district. Largely what we've modeled, and we're working with our architect right now, is it would look very similar in size to what's currently the middle school gymnasium. It may be a separate standalone building, and there's some things we're working on now about where we would place that. But again, it's all within our budget, and we feel it could be used for the schools, but is also for the community.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I know it's something that's been needed. I know the Youth League has needed additional space for some of their activities. I've been up to the Mount Vernon Field House, which is very nice, and that's why I was asking about private money also to kind of add on if there was space. I'm too sure where you're going to put everything.
That's what we're struggling with right now is how big is it? Where can it fit? And
Yeah.
then parking.
Yeah,
I mean,
parking's very important.
Yeah.
Very correct. But there are some very nice facilities out there. So the other thing, which is probably the most important, I want to commend the board, administration, staff for completing the contract before school was out. Made it for a better summer, I'm sure, for the teachers.
us too.
And and it seemed like it was done in a somewhat timely manner, and I think that was very, very big. And I'm glad they didn't have to go through some of the other situations that we went through in the past. I say that only because I was here when some of those happened. So, but anyway, but it was good. I'm glad. Whoever pushed it, forced it, whatever, it was good. I'm glad it happened. And that's basically all I had.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Jim.
Okay,
Thanks, Jim.
thanks.
I can say something about that last part. It really was a collaborative effort from everyone involved. So, the Board of Education, teacher union representatives, it's never an easy process. Administration, we work together in betterment of the children and the community. So we're very happy with the next 3 years, and we'll keep managing growth and working as a team.
Thank you. Moving on to presentations.
So we have 2 presentations for the board tonight. The first one, more of a conversation as well too. At our last work session, we don't often run as many work sessions in the summer, but at our last work session, the board asked some questions about school fees, and we've actually did some work at that session. Well, We've also done some follow-up work, and tonight we'd like to be able to review information with the Board of Education as a follow-up. And we're not looking for a vote tonight or anything, but we are looking for some discussion and direction. And part of that, I would tell you, because before we know it, the new school year is going to be here, and we haven't yet put the school supply list out, which we'll talk about that as well too. And Prime Day's coming up. I believe it's July 9th or 16th. I think it starts, right? And then the state of Ohio has expanded the tax holiday as well too. So these are important dates for parents who want to save money. So I'm going to rely a lot on Mrs. Drummy and some of the analysis. But again, we're just looking for a conversation from the board and possibly some direction moving forward.
So, with the work that we've done, engaged a number of our administrators, getting feedback as to,
Thank you. As to what would be most helpful, and then we could also quantify that. What fees and dollar amounts have we collected? What do we use them for? So we came up with a recommendation that we would like you to think about. We feel that it does make a lot of sense. There are fees we would advocate. We're going to talk about school fees along with our supply lists, because those are all things parents have to pay for at this time of year. So as we looked at those, we are advocating that we would keep, testing fees such as AP, PSAT, anything where the student has to pay for a personalized test. We would keep the technology fee for the Chromebooks, because we do have repairs, they take a lot of use. And so we would like to maintain that fee. Also, the class of, 2025 and forward at the high school, only keep those dues. Extracurricular activities for participating in those are generally conducted after school and, voluntary. We would advocate to keep those fees in place. Overnight trips. And as we start to navigate into the school supply lists and the things that parents have to pay for additionally, we would keep the cost for calculators, because students, those really would belong to the student. They'd be taken home. So we would keep that cost, grade 6 through 12. But then we would like to suspend fees for all of our general course fees. There are, basic fees that are paid for the consumable supplies, but those being part of the instructional process each day, we would like to take care of that rather than asking for the parents to take care of that. Additionally, then the school supply list, we took some time to look over those lists, to put some estimates to those, and take on that expense as a district rather than asking our parents to purchase all of the school supplies for students. The only item from those school supply lists would be the calculators. Some
Right.
thoughts?
Well, I do. I'm a strong advocate for some of these. If it's instructionally based, which is what you're looking to, we should be, with the general course fees. I feel that's a cost the district should take on personally. If you have to have it for that class, it's just like a book or anything else, and we should be covering that cost. The school supply list, my only question there or comment there, having, bought many of stuff through our school supply list every year, wondering what it was going to be, and opening it up and buying tissues and hand wipes and everything. And then everyone buys different stuff and how it gets used or doesn't get used. And there's no real, good way to know what you bought got used or didn't get used. I'd be supportive of the school using their buying power, buying that in larger bulk rather than have parents going out and buying 2 boxes of Kleenex, 4, packs of hand wipes and whatever it is for every class. So I'd be supportive of that. I don't specifically recall what's on the school supply list, though. I mean, obviously, parents still would buy their pencils and stuff like that for their own students. We're not looking to provide everything. Or are we? Are we looking to buy pencils? And that's my question.
When we put together the forecast and the budget, we could afford to take care of it all. Some of it, to your point, Mr. Swagger, about even like markers when they come in different, and It'd be, and as you said, we can manage this and use our bulk buying power. When you're buying 100 of something, there's going to be a discount. When you're buying 5,000 of something, it's a better discount, and yeah, typically. And so yes, we would advocate for all of this. And when we built the budget, especially with some of the other savings that we have, we think that we can cover all those costs. And what we're recommending, if the board would agree, is that we would do this for a year, study it, then we could come back about mid-year and say, this is how it's trending. This is, to your point about what's being used, not used, and give the board a report, and then we could decide future years if we want to continue this.
Fine. I know in our finance committee meeting, we talked about what the cost, approximate cost would be, of what we think the additional cost would be.
There's going to be some greater analysis in this, but we have some general numbers in this because, yeah, I mean, it's within the appropriations that we have organized for the district, and some of it it's only going to get better because we'll buy in such mass quantity that we'll be able to get much better pricing.
Well, from a parent standpoint, I can tell you it is a challenge. Sometimes when you get that list of one, go find them. If you don't get out there during the first week of buying it, and actually finding some of this stuff, it gets a challenge. But also, the types of the quality, quantity, all of those types of things, it does become a differentiation between our students, which I've never liked. You do realize some parents go all out and buy the best of everything, and some, buy what they can afford, and some buy whatever's available. There's just such discrepancy in everything that our kids are using, and our teachers obviously have to use most of those materials. So I would think the teachers would be supportive of not having to worry about collecting all those supplies and what quality and quantity they actually had. And quite honestly, if a student didn't bring in one of them, what are we going to not provide markers to them anyways? I mean, it gets to be a struggle.
And that's part of the thing from a financial standpoint. We supplement anyways. The board's already supplementing anyway, so this isn't like a full 100% lift of what you'd have to do. But we just think this would make sense. And, anything that's directly tied to a student that's, I'll say, consumable, or like the calculus, for example, they would pay for that because they can take it and use it. But other things that are more consumable based, I guess I would say that we could cover those costs.
I guess on the calculators, I know we discussed in the meeting, and I know I've talked with Tim and Dr. Wagner about this too, but there's grants out there that we could apply for to ensure that we have calculators in the classroom. Should the parents decide that would be like, should they want to have one at their house? Because sometimes they only use it for one course, and then they have to get a different one for another one.
Especially when you get in the middle school to high school.
Yes.
So
I'm just thinking, is there something that we can do for that?
I think it's a good point. At the last board meeting, I believe it was, we talked about the PTO and how we're going to change from a 2-building PTO to a community PTO, which is going to be K-12. One of the things we talked about with them is how we build in a lending program or giving program, like Spirit, where, my own children are in their 20s now, but they didn't wear things out. They outgrew them, and my wife did that years ago when she was PTO president. We could do the same thing with calculators and all tips, and let's use it for a course. And
so, quite honestly, you buy a calculator, use it for 2 years, and then it sits in the drawer, and batteries go dead and corrode everything.
3 kids and I have 4 calculators.
Well, you could gift that, or gift it to the district, or gift it. So these are things we're looking at. Just it makes more sense.
Okay, and then as far as if the student wants to get their own folders so that they have something on them printed rather than just a plain folder, are we going to allow that? Or because I
Yeah, I mean,
they
this
should
is
have
not meant
that
to be
ability.
exclusionary unless it doesn't conform with.
Trying to be exclusionary.
Right. No, I agree, but it's not this process. What we're recommending is not to be exclusionary, but if somebody wants to add to it, then they're welcome to do that, or I think that's fine as long as it's with our code of conduct and it doesn't challenge what we're doing from a branding standpoint. I think we're good.
Are the teachers intricately involved in this conversation? Do they know the timing and the items we're thinking about? I know the supply list is out there and people are talking about it, my phone's ringing. So I'm just wondering, it appears there's some communication lacks in here. Obviously, when you change any program, you have some voids. So not picking on that, but I think it's just extremely important that the teachers can put their thoughts in there? Because they have supplies for their room that would dovetail and integrate with what we might or might not buy. Where does that stand?
We actually,
Change
or,
principles, so,
yeah.
you know, I don't know what that looks like.
right, we're changing a principal but we're also transitioning. So we're going to have the principals work with the staff members and they're going to work through their budgets on that. So if a teacher says we need X, there should be a tie into that, just like we would buy, curriculum materials and it all lines. So we've already talked to all administration in cases where we're hiring a new high school principal. Mrs. King, if everything is approved tonight, we'll be working on transition. I'll share that information. It's the high school has the fewest supplies, but there's still some like folders and some other things. But even Mrs. Wagner at the elementary school has spent a lot of time and she has it ready and she'll be working with her staff. And I think to the point about communication, it's when you start to change things, it does create some conversation. But
Yes.
I think that I would tell you one of the things we put some scaffolding to, and we touched it up a little today, is a public release that we would send out tomorrow, depending on the outcome of tonight's discussion. And then that way we'd be very clear about what is or isn't. And then again, if the board agrees to suspend, then we would talk about evaluating, and then we could do another update in an earlier time period, probably next late winter, early spring.
The question I have is, do you need us to take board action prior to the August 2nd or whenever the sales tax?
Now,
Like,
here's
parents have to know not to go buy it if we're going to do it. I don't want them to go out and buy it and then turn around and say, oh, by the way, you don't have to have a school supply
I lost
list.
my sales
Right. I just want to make sure, how do we get that out if I mean,
administratively, we can release this as early as tomorrow, and we'll
Okay.
publish this. Mr. McDonald's already been working on the scaffolding of this. And then what we would do is we'll bring you back updates to the handbooks, and we'll do that in August. And I think that'll be before the school year starts, so we'll be fine with our timelines now.
And I have a question on the class fees.
Yes.
So we had discussion on that. And I thought we were leaning towards not charging for the freshman and sophomore classes, but we were going to charge in the junior, senior classes. But it looks like we're charging for all 4 years.
Well, that's one of the
Have
things
a
we
surplus.
need more discussion on that, right? Because we talked about how the fees are used, or the dues, I guess as they call them, are used more in the junior, senior year. So that's part of what we want to talk about too today.
I mean, year 3, we're still talking about it.
Well,
So
finishing
let's
year.
talk. Let's talk.
Okay, I'm finishing year 2, so I can't own all that. But,
I know, but-
yeah. But the point is, we just need direction from the board, and then we can push it through the budgeting process and appropriations. So I guess, I need to hear from the other 4 board
The
members.
parents don't even get a list of what these fees cover. I mean, we're told it's homecoming, it's a class trip,
Yep.
but we're not given an actual list. And I'm not sure our C-Tech students that go in their junior, senior year should be charged that because they're not actually using it either. They pay for a ticket to go to prom. They pay for a ticket to go to prom, but, they're still,
we'll have to watch
they have
that.
their own prom to go to.
We'll have to watch that with moving them here, though. I don't want to exempt C-Tech if C-Tech's in the bill. You know what I mean? That
And I understand that.
we'll have to kind of watch
mean,
out
that's
if
gonna
we're going to have a discussion
But a
on
lot
that.
of the C-Tech kids, that if they are in Newark,
Right.
they don't come to
Yeah.
the things here.
Well, you want to go up to the
I can clarify the fees a little bit for the freshman and sophomore class versus the junior and senior classes. Those are cumulative fees. We don't have to do any extra fundraising for the classes to pay for prom, for all of the graduation stuff, homecoming, all of those kinds of things. So it is a cumulative fee. It is a lower fee in the freshman, sophomore, and junior year at $20. And senior year, it's $35 because we have more expenses senior year. I forgot to mention the Cedar Point tickets paid out of that and the transportation to Cedar Point as well. So that's why we also charge the freshmen and sophomores for dues.
So it's essentially a 4-year payment plan for the stuff that, I mean, not to, that's
Yeah,
what it
that's
sounds like.
exactly
It's a
what it
4-year
is.
payment plan to do the things your junior,
And
senior
that's
year.
in lieu of doing a lot of extra fundraising.
Yeah, otherwise you'd have to, junior, senior year, $85 fees or $100 fees. So you're spreading it out over the 4 years to make
Yes.
it more palatable.
How many kids went on the Cedar Point trip?
This year we had about 65, 70. In the past, we usually have about 80 kids.
So do you give refund to the kids that don't go?
No, because those fees are included in other things like graduation, prom, homecoming. So
I
those
just think
things.
it's wrong because not everybody's using these. And for Cedar Point, we should be giving a approval by parents. And that doesn't happen at the beginning of the year, but they require us to, as parents, to pay for that in order for the kids to go to homecoming.
One of the things the board asked about, and Mrs. Drummond on this, is starting to look at the accounting principles about when these monies are deposited and where they're going. So that's part of the reason we kept it in this year to study that, and because I was decided and dumped into a larger, and what we want to do is have some better detail on that, and in terms of, we know what the deposits are, but how the expenditures,
And,
you know,
each
disaggregate.
class is like
Yeah.
taking that last
Yeah.
amount and getting it to another class.
I was going to say there's rollover
Yeah.
each
and
year,
Gift
so.
And that account has quite a bit of money
Yeah.
as it rolls over. So
It usually spend up to a couple $1,000s that goes forward.
Mhm.
But from a Board of Education standpoint, I think one of the questions you're going to ask is, how does this pull through a forecast? We don't have all that detail, just to be blunt about it. And, you know, it's been aggregated into one account, and we think that it should be better organized. And our recommendation would be to keep those in this year, study it. But again, if we're putting on the calendar, we could say, okay, this is what happened with supplies, this is what happens with summer school fees, and then we could talk about what the exposure is moving forward.
So are we gonna sort of filter through this through finance committee or curriculum committee? Because I think it originally came up in the curriculum committee. I don't mind in finance. I just,
I don't care either.
yeah, I was just, because I
Just-
know we have more
maybe-
information, so I was just curious, will it?
I think it came up in curriculum, but
Yeah.
we didn't have the finance committee yet.
Yeah.
Now we've established the
Well,
finance
Yeah,
and
I
it
just
gets,
was trying to see who's gonna
confusing.
To me, it's a finance issue because it's
That's
not.
fine. I was just wondering who
I
was
mean,
gonna filter
you
through
I think
it.
it's more of a finance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Felicia is looking at separating all our costs, right?
Okay.
And as Jim mentioned, right, you know, our reports are more detailed than what we had in the past.
Mhm.
And we, you know, Ruth Ann's part of the finance committee too, right? And we're really looking at more detail to really understand where our income is coming in and where we actually placing instead of moving to our accounts. So Felicia's done a lot of work and still has more work to do because there's a lot of different places.
I think we're realizing that there are disparities. We can't cure them all in 24 hours, but good discussion. I think we bring it back and put all the thoughts on the table. I feel finance committee is appropriate,
Yeah.
but I surely appreciate what you all are saying
Yeah.
too. We just need to put it together. and-
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just knew we
Right.
were probably gonna wanna move quickly, and so I was just
Yeah.
thinking, like, is it information coming to me, or am I coming to you for questions? It'll be you
Well,
guys.
And to be fair about it, we always manage the student handbooks through the curriculum committee, and that was
Yeah.
an outgrowth of some board objectives. Remember, even last August, we talked about evaluating some of these things, so we can check those boxes. We did it.
Sure.
But again, we would just like to have better detail to be able to come to the board again, so you can push it forward or pull it through a 5-year forecast.
I would just say that looking at the class fees is probably a good point now that we look at supplies, the general education fees, because you're asking parents to pay for something and they're not getting, their child is not getting it. So
Well, I think there's that, and the other thing is there,
it's a
Is it-
donation. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, you're asking for a donation.
and when we start to parse through those costs, are there ways that we can actually have some economies in this too? Like, I don't know if we can better negotiate some of these things. So this is what we're going to be doing if the board agrees to the school supply list. We're going to use our buying power, and we like to also take that, but we need to know exactly our parameters, and then we can go forward. And maybe group sales needs to be, I don't know how you deal with it, Tammy. I'm sure you do a great job, but maybe there's more we could be doing to help with that. You know, maybe we need to encourage and find out why we don't have near 100% attendance going to places like that too. I think the point about CTEC and our 2 programs coming on site is something we have to think about, because it's not going to be offsites.
Well, when the seniors at CTEC have internships, they're not able to leave those jobs. That's their responsibility. So
Yeah.
unless, I mean, that's their responsibility. It goes up until the
Right.
last day before
Right.
they graduate.
Right.
That's what they're expected to do.
Yeah.
And I think we're recognizing
So too.
And I didn't know all that
Right.
until just
I think
recently
it's fair.
myself.
I think these are all good discussions we can continue. I think starting somewhere with the school supplies is good. I think,
I think we made
that'll
good
re-
progress.
yeah, that's good progress for us. So.
So is the board accepting it? I don't need a vote. We'll bring this back to you next month with student handbooks, but so we've got the scaffolding together so that we would waive all school supply fees, our list there, and we'll keep the school fees that we talked about. And again, we'll put it on the calendar and we'll get subcommittees mid-year next year.
We'll have to push that message pretty hard though, because parents are going to be out there looking for a school
Yep.
supply list.
Yep.
I know I would be,
Well, they
if you're
already
not.
are.
I did
Right.
see,
The moms groups are already looking.
and I did see Craig already mentioned earlier in the week, like list will be posted Wednesday. Look
Okay.
out.
What-
So,
Friday.
Yeah.
oh, that's what I
Yeah.
meant. Yeah,
We-
will be when.
We have a group.
Okay.
I'm going to plan to release the letter I did last year on Friday. And so it's much earlier. There'll be some transportation in there. It's getting ready for the school year supply list. Will be there. On the supply list links, we'll have our new communication that we've started to scaffold. So that'll be there. We'll push it through social media. So we'll get the information out.
Excellent. Thank you.
And teachers need to be included in these discussions because at this point, they don't have books. So I know that. So I'm just saying, we need to be sure that they're being heard. What do they need? How soon do they need it? What's been provided in the past for their classrooms? Is it enough? Is it not enough? How soon do they need the 8x10, whatever it is? So I'm just saying, we need to
Yeah,
be sure
I think it's a
to
good point.
Dial that up.
Yeah, that's a good point. All the principals are working on that. So.
Maybe we could get with their union president and have her talk to them.
No, I think they just need to talk. It's straightforward.
We just,
I see what you.
yeah. That's the other part of it is because when you do the school supplies, I don't know if it's enough or more than enough, for that year. So we do need to talk to the teachers to find out, like, all right, if you've got 24 kids in your class and they're all bringing 2 boxes of tissues, does that get you through a year? And if
No.
not,
Right.
well, that's
No.
what, and that's,
And it doesn't
if
have
not,
to
what I
just-
don't want to make the mistake of is just taking the supply list and ordering off of that and saying, we need 48 boxes for that classroom, knowing that we really need 65, whatever that is. That's the discussion that has to happen at the building levels to determine what's the true quantity needed.
And it doesn't need to become a union issue. I
Oh,
need
yeah,
to
yeah,
hear
yeah.
from
No,
each
no, no,
teacher.
I was
We still
joking,
are a
'cause-
small town,
No,
so
no.
sorry, Katie, but it doesn't have to be on that table.
Wow, I
No,
don't think we
we're,
ever
we're not
discouraged.
planning to do that. This will get to the point where we'd like to take care of that as a school district and
Yeah.
see what we can do. So if you
So
need
need
the
to
better
tell
Scott's,
You need to tell Dr.
if you
Wagner
need Scott's
the
paper
bounds.
towels, then we buy the Scott's paper towels.
Right.
Yeah, but no, those are things because again, yeah. No, those are things we're going to try and take care of as a school district. And again, we can go out and bulk buy that and get much more competitive pricing. Yep. Nope. No.
We should be handling it because that's what I want to avoid is you having to get a parent in your class that's willing to donate a bunch of stuff and some other teacher doesn't. Now what are we doing? We have those disparities. So I'd rather the district take that and supply those so every classroom's getting what they need.
The school supply lists are the most extensive at the elementary, and Mrs. Wagner's done a nice job, Robin Wagner has, with getting everything organized. So she's actually been the lead for some of our analysis in this. So we'll continue that. And if you need more of that, then we'll take care of that. Okay, you can say. You sure?
Yep.
Okay. Next presentation?
Yep.
Okay. Somewhat of a discussion on this too. We've been talking about getting ready for the next school year, and I don't need the board to vote on anything tonight. If all goes as expected, I'll probably be bringing you some items to vote on in early August. But you have there's a PowerPoint, and I want to walk through this for you. Through this real quick. We've been looking at our vocational agricultural program at the high school. And it's come up because as we look at programs, we're trying to figure out the direction we're moving forward. And do we have good programs? Do we need to modify this in some way? So if you go to the second slide, and as the board members do, I know it's hard to see and it's small, but what this is a representation of our VOAG student enrollment numbers from 2014-15 school year to this what's projected this coming school year. And again, don't get lost in the bar graphs or the histograph there, but you can look at the trend line. And in the 2014-15 school year, that was our high water mark, where we had 78 students enrolled in the program. If you look at the capacity of the program, we could serve up to 154 students. So again, our high water mark was in the 2014-15 school year. We had 78 students. Projected forward this coming school year, we have 22 students projected for our vocational agricultural program. What we've been studying is the viability, I guess, and should we be continuing with vocational agricultural programming, or agri-science as it's often called as well. And if you go to the next slide, I know that's very small to see for some. Actually, will you go to the next slide as well, and then we can go back to this one if we need to. Each of those colored graphs that you had seen, or the different tables there, these are actually the topical areas that you can see. I can go back to the color ones, but we thought we'd make it a little bit more readable. So what you're looking at is when you have an agriculture environmental sciences program, which is what it's really called, there are 6 pathways that can be followed. Those 6 pathways are what's listed there, you can see. The colored graph that I showed you, go back to that one too, and then I'm going to go back and forth a little bit on this. The blue one there that I'm sure everyone can't read because it's small, that's the agribusiness and production systems. That program is where we have been spending our time in our program within the school district. If you dive a little deeper in that, we've done a bit of an audit, and we're really touching in 4 areas of content within that pathway. The other 5 pathways, as you go to the right, those are all what they call CTE 26, or their career tech programs. We do not currently have any instruction in the school district or at the high school on those other 5 pathways. So again, we're touching 4 of the standards in that blue, or that first one, the agribusiness and production systems. And Debbie, I'll ask you to go forward to the larger slide so you can see that. And then the other 5 are there. And again, this all translates as it does on the colored page. So we're not really addressing anything with industrial power technology, animal science and management, agricultural, food and natural resources, bioscience, horticulture, or natural resources management. So we've been talking about what to do. And there are really 2 outcomes on this. We can continue on our path. Well, there's probably 3. We can continue on the current path, but again, you saw the same trend line. And again, 154 students is it represents the capacity we have. 22 students projected for the fall. Or we can look to possibly suspend the program and try and rebuild. And that's where we're leaning right now. What we've talked to the Northridge schools, and they're willing to partner with us for a year, and we could offer VOAG or agri-science in this coming school year for the 22 students. And again, Northridge School has been very supportive of the partnership. Now, the other part of this is, what do we do for the future? Because we can continue the partnership with Northridge, or we can build a program. And we've been talking to some community members, many of whom are associated with the commercial farms in the area. And as frequent as today, just about 2 hours before this meeting, had a discussion with some of those community representatives, and they're very interested in rebuilding a program. And if we rebuild a program, then we would want to touch on these 6 areas, talk about where's the area of focus, and then also how do we grow that program. Is it within just a couple areas, multiple areas? And then if we did that, then we want to talk about who's the staff member we need. And I gave this example, and it probably is the most befitting to this. When you look at, I'll just tangent for a minute, but when you look at music teachers, in the state of Ohio, music teachers are all licensed K-12, but they specialize. So although you might have someone who specializes in band and they could teach general music at an elementary, it doesn't always fit as well like that. And it's similar in this area too. Like to find someone who can cover 6 areas probably isn't the path forward. So we want to talk about what we can do to make sure we have a robust program moving forward. So anyways, talk to some community members, and we're going to form a study committee and have some community members, and they're going to help us. And so my suggestion is that we collaborate, consolidate with the Northridge schools, for the 24-25 school year, and we talk about whether we should start a new program in 25-26 school year, or later we could. So I'll be quiet for a couple minutes and address questions you have, and I can provide more detail.
I don't really have any questions, but as a son of a dairy farmer, growing up on a dairy farm, I think agriculture is very important. Even though I'm not in agriculture today, I still have a couple of farms. My voice is hoarse today because I think I sprayed too many herbicide incorrectly over Saturday. So it is what it is, right? So
Sounds like you would have benefited from a
yeah,
course.
We're not
I
How to
probably
properly
forgot
spread.
from my youth.
Yes.
I probably forgot all these things from my youth, and I've been scolded about what I did. But I think agriculture has a really important part, right? We have a lot of students that have gone on with careers in agriculture, and I think it's something that we need to really take a look at and see how we can make our program more dynamic. I think the problem with our program is that we lost being very dynamic, and it got kind of stale, if I had to make a sense of where we might have gone. And you really need to look at what skill set and where do you want to take it, right? Agriculture is very complex in today's world, right? It's not just you put a seed in the ground, right, and it grows, right? There's a science behind it. There's economics behind it. It's quite intense to be able to make it. Margins are very thin, so in order to do it, you have to be very good at it. So I think that's something that we can rebuild it and make it very dynamic and make it very attractive. I think that the program can grow. So I appreciate all your efforts, Dr. Wagner, in trying to make this a dynamic program, because that's where we really need to go.
Well, I'll tell you, the community meeting, we just started it today, and we're 4 families represented. They're very encouraged about where we can grow this. And I think there's a bit of a question, is this just an effort to just get rid of a program and move on? And I said, look at what we're doing from a career tech standpoint. Next year, we'll stand up the multi-skilled technician, and we'll still end up the electrical trade, so we can do that. And I think they were very encouraged to hear that. And we can show we will do it. But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it well. And then I'll show you a growing program. Now, we might have to start small and see the program, but we've done that before with advanced placement, with other programs, and then we'll be able to monitor that. And I think it'll be very robust.
I'm really appreciative to Northridge that they can host our students who want to continue in the program, and we, aren't just kind of leaving them behind.
Yep.
And how does that look like? Would they spend all day at Northridge, or a portion of the day, or?
So, yes, it could be either or. One of the options we looked at also is, do we want to have a virtual option and then bring the students together for projects? That's going to be, that's not desirable for Northridge. We have different bell schedules. We have a modified block. They have a traditional schedule. So we have those longer block days on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So they really don't want a virtual option, although they'll let our students come full day or just part of the day, and we'll work through that. And we'll see but that way it still provides an opportunity for our students. Then we'll have to look at the scheduling part of that, because we'll have some travel time if they do the part day. Mrs. King, I know she's leaving, but she and I have been working closely with this, and I need to compliment Mrs. Seibel too, because a lot of this data you're looking at, and in her role as Director of Curriculum Instruction, she's been in technology, she's been working on this as well.
I'd definitely like to see us work together with community members and rebuild. I think that's needed. I think the interest will come along as well.
Yeah, to me, this isn't an effort to get rid of a program. It's an effort to save the program.
Right.
Because if you look at those declining numbers, it's clear that it's not, as desirable as we like it. So if we don't rebuild it and do something different, it will go away on its own, which is not what we want. So I think this is a great effort.
Should they be offering something at the middle school level for this? Is
Yeah.
that where the interest is? is kind of dwindling?
Yeah.
Do we know?
So it's a great question. So when you zoom out on this, I purposely talked about pathways, right? Think about what we did with the program of studies last year and what's managed. Everything is built on a 7-12 pathway now. So that question is where we need to live, and that's what we should be doing from a curriculum instruction standpoint is where's your exposure programs? How do you start to refine those? And as you move through the system, it's still going to be your 3 pathways. So are we going directly to workforce? Are we going into some form of secondary education, tertiary education? Are we going military? So all those, it all fits together. And this is part of the larger scaffolding that we put together. Yeah. I had a community member talk about should we be advocating and, come to the board and where's the board? And I said, listen, the Board of Education really hasn't given me any position on this because I haven't presented it yet. And I said, the idea is that I know they're going to want excellence and let's build this for the future. I said, you can come and advocate for it. And, we can go from 22 to possibly, if the trend line follows, it'll be next year. But, if you do the math, we're running at about 15% capacity right now, give or take. We don't run programs like that. Again, I might have to seed something and get started, but we'll have an upward trajectory. So if you're okay with everything, this is the direction. Again, I don't need a vote tonight, but what we will do is the next board meeting, I'll have a couple action items that will relate to this. Might be like an MOU with Northridge. Also, we don't talk about personnel matters, in public session, but I can tell you that I've been working closely with the JEA, and people have multiple licenses or multiple abilities, and we can help with some licensures. So I don't think you'll see an employment action that'll be adverse on this, or maybe it could be a reassignment at the next board meeting. But I think we'll take care of that one, and it makes sense for a position we need filled in the school district. So if there's nothing else, we'll continue on that path. And again, you'll see some action items at the August meeting.
Sounds great. Thank you. On to discussions, board committees.
We haven't had a lot of board committees, except for we did the strategic planning, economic development, construction projects, more of that latter. So, Mr. Swager, if you want to share any details from that. Or
I think a lot of what we just shared with Mr. Hill was talked about at that meeting is the development of the 6 classroom expansion, what that looks like, where it goes, the school board office, and then the multi-use community space and the PAC. And kind of those orders, and we just had a larger discussion about how we're going to go through those projects. Obviously, the classroom expansion is the number one project that's going to get designed and built first, followed by the board office, followed by the multi-space and PAC jointly on that.
Right. Where do we put the structures we're talking about, and should they be on our campus, should they be somewhere else? So the information is very open. Discussions are in their infancy, so that's great.
We know the 6 classrooms go there.
They go
Other than
there.
that, we have to make decisions on where they go. So, even on the 6 classrooms, though, it was a detailed conversation about how the steps go, how the HVAC works, additional parking. We've got some ways to possibly squeeze in another 40 or 50 parking spots through some pull-off areas and stuff at our current lot there. So it's an expanded, not just the 6 classrooms. It's additional parking, which anyone that comes to anything here knows is greatly needed.
And then the other thing that we just touched on, and it's not part of the 4 core areas, but should we take this as an opportunity and could we look at an alternate? So maybe there's almost like a 5th project. We're going to have some dirt that's excavated from the building addition on the high school. Most likely the board office, there'll be some as well too. And we know dirt's not hard to find. Is it now time to try to look at softball and baseball? And should we take a larger project there and even look at water and sewer and so we just have real preliminary discussions. So Ruth Ann and Tim, when we have further meetings, we'll dig into that a little further.
Tim, could you also go into a little detail that the addition to the high school, that was something that we thought about and we had planned for that in the future? Could you tell the public?
Yeah, sure. So the 6 classroom expansion on the current high school was actually pre-designed when we built the high school. We had it designed for that, so that way when we knew growth was coming eventually, we would be able to add those 6 classrooms on. That's also why on the budgeting side, we put those aside because we obviously went out to a bond to get the buildings built originally. We want to make sure that that expansion was covered under those. So we were prepared for that. And as Mr. Hill mentioned earlier, we'll be able to go through these construction projects without coming to the taxpayers for additional dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you. On
And
to
then-
consent.
Yeah, and then we have LPDC that'll meet in a couple days. Sometimes they don't always have the summer meeting, but they will. Consent, can I introduce two people before we get into consent? I'm going to ask Mrs. Wagner to introduce Emily, I believe, right? Emily Edwards, and the board's already approved Emily, but she wasn't able to make the meeting, so if you can conduct an introduction, and then we'll ask Mr. Shipton to introduce himself next before we get to official voting.
Sure. So I have with me Emily Edwards. She's going to serve with us as an intervention specialist here at the middle school. So she comes to us as a graduate of Olentangy High School, I think in 2019. Is that correct? Yes. All right. And she's a recent graduate of Ohio University. So just to note there, she actually raised almost $10,000 for the Autism Speaks Foundation, which is a really big deal. And I think that speaks to her passion for special education and students with special needs. And I want to make note of that. And I want to say thank you to the board and then to our union for negotiating a contract that gives us some leverage to recruit such wonderful young educators. But beyond that, we can do so much with money. We have to have young people who are passionate and they see education not just as a job and a career, but as a calling. And I think that Emily represents that. And so we are so excited to have her on board. I asked her when she interviewed with us, I said, did you interview other places? She said, yes, but I didn't feel kind of that sense of home and family anywhere else but here. And so that's part of the reason that she's here. And so I think she's going to be an asset. I think that she's a rising star for us. I'm really excited to see the positive impact that she makes really with our students with special needs here. So let's welcome Emily and thank you guys for approving her employment. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Shipton, do you want to, you're coming up on the agenda here too, so maybe you could introduce yourself and see if the board has any questions.
Good evening. Mike Shipton. I first want to express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the board and Dr. Wagner in hopefully hiring me as the next principal of Johnstown-Monroe High School. Honored and privileged for the opportunity to serve our students, our staff, our families of the Johnstown-Monroe School District. It's been a whirlwind the last day and a half, quick turnaround. I know there's a deadline July 10th here, which is today. But having previous relationships with built over the years at Heights with Dr. Wagner and of course Mrs. King as well. I think it's going to be a smooth transition and looking forward to the opportunity. Look forward to working with all of you as we embark on a new year here and supporting our students of the Johnstown-Monroe School District and preparing them for individual excellence that we strive for across the board, socially, emotionally, and academically. So I'm glad to be here. Been in public education for 25 years, 14 years as an educator, teacher in Columbus City Schools, Reynoldsburg City Schools. In the last 11 years, I've been a building administrator in both Reynoldsburg and at Licking Heights School District. So I'm thrilled to get started and can't wait. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Take any questions.
All right, thank you.
For me. Thank you.
I think if it's okay, then I'll go through consent then.
Yep.
So resolution 24-07-146 is approval of consent agenda.
If I can get a motion,
Second.
conversation.
Okay. Do you want me to do a quick run?
Please.
Okay. So we have resignations. Always hate to see people leave, but Angel King, obviously kind of a surprise. Mr. Shipton talked about the fast timeline. This all started Monday night. So fortunately, we did have a good professional relationship, and he has a relationship with the school district. So we're glad everything's come together on that. We have some unpaid days that we did capture in the last board meeting. We have Mr. Shipton's contract. I do want to say too, that special thank you to the team, because one of the many things that makes Johnstown special is how well people come together, and we talk about a professional family. I was talking to Mr. Busenberg Monday night, and I said, we might be losing Mrs. King. Stay by the phone on Tuesday morning. Tuesday morning I called them, and we had a process together, and we had 17 people come together for an interview. I want to thank 2 of our board members. So Mrs. Thomas, Mrs. Davis were there for a bit of it. Teachers from the high school. Mrs. Ortman was there, many of our administrators. So it just shows our professional passion and all. So we had 17 people, and we went through a very comprehensive process. So thank you to all involved. The next item are additional days for transition for Mr. Shipton, so there'll be up to 10 days. Certified employment are part-time school psychologists who we continue to need. Some extended days that we normally have approved, so for our staff. So you can see there for student support specialists and also guidance. You'll notice that Mrs. Arbogast is less time. We talked with her about it, and we think through some efficiencies, we don't need as many days, and that works for her and the students. So if you're used to seeing more days there, that works. Supplemental contract corrections. We went through the contract, and the board recently approved it. It was ratified by the union. We made some changes in supplementals, so we have to make some adjustments there based on those changes. So that corrects earlier board agenda action items. Supplemental employment. We're starting to hire some supplemental positions for the upcoming school year. It's primarily in the fall, you'll see. So there have been questions about who we're hiring for the future. We'll bring those to the board when it's appropriate, and that'll continue into people activity. You can see some of the fall sports that are there. Parent volunteers we have. We also have our technology inventory disposal. We have end of life on some of our machines, and Mrs. Seibel helps lead this with our technology program, and James McCarty. And what we do is we take things out of service and we recycle those. There's some precious metals, so we put those on the truck and get a little bit of back to the district. And then we purchase it where needed. Board meeting minutes are straightforward unless there's questions. Ohio School Plan Insurance, this is an annual renewal, and we're presenting that to the board. Monthly finance report, I believe, is it's attached there for the board to see. I think that covers all areas of consent unless there are questions.
All right. Any questions on consent? Obviously, no disrespect to your Michael. We do hate to see Angel leave, though. We enjoyed her quite a bit, so you have high expectations to meet as well. Anyone else have any questions, comments on anything? All right, call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Welcome aboard, Michael.
So we'll go treasurer.
I have several resolutions for you this evening concerning our fiscal year end to ratify some of the actions that took place. The first item, Resolution 24-07-147, to approve and ratify transfers as of June 30.
If I can get a motion,
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
conversation.
I would just add that we only had to do one transfer. A transfer is actually permanent action, and that means I'm sorry, we had three. Excuse me. One that you were prepared for with the athletic fund. We had asked for up to $50,000. We only needed $33,504.59 to bring that fund to zero. We will need to explore, and will explore in the finance committee and with our new athletic director, how do we support the athletic fund and looking at all of those. Then we had some year-end activity with our food service. When we have funds that are left on student accounts, we actually move those to an unclaimed fund, and we hold that for 5 years. In the event that a parent comes forward and would like a refund, we will do that.
Is that only graduating seniors? Does everyone else just
Yes.
carry over? Okay.
Yes, or if they've
Or
withdrawn.
they've withdrawn. Okay.
Mhm. and any negative meal credit when a student has withdrawn. We need to cover that. And the total of all of that activity is $34,630.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
And can you, Felicia, explain to the public what we're doing here with all these resolutions that is year end? Can you explain that to everybody so that everybody knows why we're doing all these different motions? Okay.
It looks like a lot. So in June, we only had one meeting, regular meeting in June, and it was early in the month. And so we still had about 20 days, 25 days, I can't remember the exact date. I think it was 20 days of business to still conduct. So I presented to the board our preliminaries where we were at that moment, that snapshot in time, with a projection to June 30. And you passed resolutions at that time to allow some flexibility in the event that what we projected, what actually occurred, was a little different. And so this month, as you review these activities, you would be ratifying those actions. And everything, as I will present, is within the ranges of what we talked about. So it keeps it official. And it's kind of tough when we go right up until the end of the month, unless the only alternative would be to actually hold a board meeting at the end of the day on June 30.
And this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. So again, we're trying to be more concise about what we're trying to do and shine the light more on exactly what's happening. So that's why it looks a little bit different from what we've done in years in the past.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
The next action would be Resolution 2407148 to approve and ratify advances that were made at June 30.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Conversation?
Just on these items, these are temporary. An advance is a temporary loan from the general fund, and they all went into grant funds as we are awaiting reimbursement from ODE, the Ohio Department of Education.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
The next resolution, 2407149, to approve and ratify the fiscal 24 appropriations and estimated resources.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Conversation?
On these items, this is actually what is attached is where we ended up with our final appropriations and final revenues.
Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
And the final resolution would be to approve and ratify the fiscal 25 temporary appropriations and estimated resources as of July 1st, and further authorize submission to the Licking County Auditor.
Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Conversation, questions?
I would just let you know that with these being temporary, you should expect to see in September or October, the permanents would be approved for the year.
Thank you. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. Moving on to superintendent recommendations.
Resolution 24-07-141 is overnight field.
151.
I'm sorry, 151. What did I say? 151. Overnight field trip for fifth grade camp.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can I get a second?
A second.
Conversation?
You've seen these before, so.
Yeah, I know that did we always split them up or was that a COVID thing? We always split the group? It was since COVID, okay.
Since-
And I know we've gotten a new camp since COVID, and I don't have a problem with it. I just,
yeah.
okay, it's more of a,
They can't
okay.
handle the volume.
it's not a
Classes
safety
of
thing,
them.
it's a capacity thing. Got it. Just want to clarify. Thanks.
Any other questions? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-152 is transportation deemed impractical for the 23-24 school year. I'd add that you've seen these resolutions, but we're adding to them as I said we would. So this resolution and the next one are additions since we have more data since an earlier board meeting.
Motion?
I'll motion. I'll second.
Any other conversation? We've done this. All right. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-153 is a payment in lieu of transportation for the 23-24 school year.
If I can get a motion
I'll motion.
and a second.
Second.
Any conversation on this one? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Resolution 24-7-145, I'm sorry, 154, I'm in trouble today. Approve fiscal year 25 lack of service level agreement.
Can I get a motion
I'll motion.
and a second?
Second.
Just as a quick reminder, we may not continue our relationship with LACA, so we've already provided notice that by July 1 of 25, we could sever our relationship, but this allows us to carry through this school year.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Resolution 24-7-155 is approval of fiscal year 25 EMIS plus service agreement.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion. Second.
This is the continuation of the relationship that we formed with, and I don't know if this will continue through the whole year, but we're going to measure it and we'll bring it back to the board, let you know if we ended sooner.
Any other questions on this? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-156 is a volunteer for the 24-25 school year.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Call the roll.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Abstain.
Mr. Swager?
We'll go with that. Yes.
Resolution 24-07-157 is physical occupational therapy services agreement. This is an annual contract the board approves to support our students with special needs.
Can I get a motion
I'll motion.
and a second?
Second.
Any other questions on this one? Call the roll.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-158 is second reading of revised policies. And I know there's been some Friday report additions that have contained more information about these policies.
Can I get a motion
I'll make the motion.
and a second?
I'll second it.
Questions, comments on these?
I just want to thank Mr. Busenberg, who went back through our last board meeting a couple of times to make sure he captured all of our questions and stuff. And thanks for getting back the responses.
Thanks, Mr. Busenberg.
Well, I mean, he had
He
to
wasn't
go-
paying attention. I want to make sure he
Oh.
heard the thank you.
I was like, he had to go sit through and listen to it again.
He
and-
wasn't paying attention.
No, I want to make sure he heard it. So. All right, thanks. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-159 is second reading of rescinded policies.
Can I get a motion?
A motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-160, first reading of replacement policies.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-161, second reading of new policy.
Can we get a motion?
I'll motion.
I'll second it.
Discussion? This is on the diploma deferral. Call the roll.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Resolution 24-07-161A is amendment to the inner treasurer's contract. And that's the, just as a reminder, that's the one we verbally added at the beginning of the meeting.
If I can get a motion,
So moved.
can I get a
Second.
second? Discussion. I think just for the public, know we're working on a longer term contract with Ms. Drummy, so this is a 1 month extension to allow us time to complete that contract. And we have to do a 1 month extension to make sure that we're bonded through our treasurer so that she can continue her job. So that's what this vote is for. Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Any board comments? Superintendent?
I can go through these quick as a reminder, and we'll send this out to you. Vacation schedule starts. So between me, Mr. Busenberg, and Mrs. Seibel, one of us will be in the district some point through the end of this month. Sometimes two of us will be out, but we're squeezing the vacation schedules for the end of July. My phone, if I'm out of town, you know how to reach me. Quickly, and we can do this more at another time, but July 4th festivities went very well. Weather held out for the most part, and I really appreciate the partnership with the city, and Ben Lee does an outstanding job with that. I will tell you that we went through the audio-visual system and had it perfect, and people get in there, and so we're going to take a look at that. You know, the problem is we have two competing systems there, and we're going to work on that because we had some challenges that day. If you heard any feedback or some other things, but as of 10:30 that morning, we had everything perfect. So, but we'll work on that. So we're going to have one married system in the future. I talked about this just briefly before. I'll be releasing a letter on Friday. It's going to be some district updates. One of which is going to be transportation registration. I want to applaud Mr. Busenberg and Mr. McDonald's helping on this too. But we're working with our transportation company, and we're doing an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out model that should make it much more efficient. So again, I'll have a larger letter that'll be a part of it. Wanted to give an update on cheerleading. You know, nothing official tonight, but there has been a request for stunting in the past. We're studying that. We'll be giving the board an update about stunting, but looking at legal aspects of that, insurance aspects, procedural, and working with our coach. So more to come on that, and watch for updates. JYAA has a softball request. I believe the board has seen this, and that is to use our softball field at the north property. Looks like it could be a good arrangement where they would take care of all the prep work on the area, and they just request exclusive access to that. And it does not look like it'll displace anyone, so we're planning to move forward with that request unless there's any questions from the board.
And just to clarify, that's during after school over the summer
Yes.
into the fall, so it's not, it doesn't compete with any of our school sports.
Couple other items real quick. Volleyball middle school coach. I didn't put someone on the agenda for you tonight. We do have a candidate. It'll be one that I'll bring after the fact, because we know that volleyball is going to start for the middle school here soon, or the conditioning. But we have to always work through the state and the pre-employment practices, and sometimes background checks and all take a while to work through the system, especially in the summer. So you'll see that after the fact, but we will stay on our schedule for middle school volleyball.
If you get that background check before the next board meeting, though, you'll start that employee based on the good faith of.
Yes.
Okay. I just
Yeah,
want to make
I'll
sure
use-
we're not holding up.
No,
position?
and that's,
Okay.
the board has previously approved the superintendent to employ in advance, so I'll do that. But then I bring it to the next board meeting, but I don't want to hold things up, so in case you hear anything that's working. One other thing, and I won't be in town for this, but July 16th at 6 p.m., I'll send you out more information about this. But there's an EPA hearing, have you heard about this, with the water and sewer, sewer treatment plant in Alexandria. Send you more information about that, but I think we need to make sure that we understand how our entire school district is being served and the implications for growth. That's the number one thing that I'm asked, and we know water and sewer is going to dictate that. So there's a community meeting. We'll probably help push that through some of our social media channels and all too. Be nice to have some school representatives if people are available, and again, we'll get specifics out.
Where is that meeting at? I haven't seen anything about it.
I'll get it
actually.
to you. I believe it might be the Church of Christ, but don't hold me on that. Let me
In
get the,
Alexandria.
yeah,
Church of Christ in
yeah.
Alexandria.
But let me get details on
It
that.
is. It's
Okay.
6 p.m. July 16th at the Church of Christ at Alexandria, 5380 Moots Run Road.
Thank you.
I just pulled up the IEPA website. So, yeah, I think that's going to be critical. We need to understand what's being proposed, what the impact of that proposal is to us, because this is about the wastewater treatment plant of
Yes.
St. Albans. While people think of St. Albans, but that would service potentially into the Johnstown School District area. So we'd need to know what the impact of that would be and how it would affect our growth.
Yeah, and I think the EPA, not expert in this, but I think that would approve service areas too, and we need to understand how our areas are going to be serviced. It could be opening up other service opportunities in the future. And again, we want a good plan. We know how much time we spent on our plan and how we want to keep our managed growth here in the school district. And that's all I have, unless there are questions from the board.
No. All right. At this point, if we can move on to the executive session.
Resolution 24-07-162 is executive session. It's for two reasons: consideration of appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official. And the other item is discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are subject of pending or imminent court action.
If I can get a motion.
I'll motion.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Do not expect to ask the board for any vote afterwards, by the way.
Make sure the public heard it. There's no expected vote afterwards. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Boer?
Yes.
Mr. Benton?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Swager?
Yes. Moving into executive at 6:49.